It's story time. 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 All right, I am ready for episode number 7. I'm actually keeping track of these episodes now since I've gone back and listened to all of them. Not in any sort of egotistical way or to hear my own voice. I am listening back to reiterate thoughts, or not reiterate, but to refresh my mind on thoughts that I wasn't even really aware of me having until I was put on the spot and was required to think out loud about what I'm seeing, to make this more, to bring things to the surface more so that I can take those newfound stewed over thoughts and reapply them to something that I'm currently concocting in my mind for a piece that I'm doing next, which I still not have sketched, but through listening back on these pieces and going over what I've already kind of covered, at my roots, I'm more equipped to consciously put symbols in this next piece. Like I'm more confident about placing things because I know there is a strong foundation underlying all of the symbols that I use. However innocent they may appear with my new Peillustration style, they are being discussed. At least I'm aware of my own viewpoint on what is being discussed in all of the symbols that I repeat. And yeah, so episode number 7. Let's get this shit started. We came from the Game of Cones and the Mary. It was me trying to break apart the opposing sides, my yin and my yang, my docile energy, my peaceful energy, my understanding energy, and the yin and my yang, the aggressive and acting and just very energetic energies. So breaking those apart, I saw both sides of my yin yang, and given that, I had to make a piece that comes next that we'll talk about more in this episode. I had to make a piece that discussed how I was going to arrive at a solution, and that opened a whole new can of worms, which is kind of what's happening with this, me looking back at these works and listening back to what I think about them. This process I thought was going to solve my dilemma of constructing the next Peillustration, but in this act I found myself filling in the blanks between where I am now and where I wanted to be while I was initiating this whole episodic journey. There are one or two pieces that I think I need to do before I can even make the piece that I thought I would need help understanding my work in order to do effectively. But before we do that, I'm going to do my ritualistic. Hopefully, this can be a tradition and I get better at this and I get better questions, and maybe people can suggest puns, or I don't know. Maybe I'll come up with my own. But I'm going to be continuing this thing. It might even change, but I'm going to continue this tradition where I incorporate a pun and a question and answer so that it can kind of humanize this process, and maybe something meaningful to me, maybe to you, can erupt from the candid speech about something mundane, or maybe even the pun can just settle the ego down and laugh off the jaggedness of self-awareness. But all right, let's start with the question. This was just a randomly generated question. What's your favorite daily routine? My favorite daily routine. It depends. There are daily routines that I wish I did every day. And then there are daily routines that when I do it on a consecutive basis, I love it and promise myself that I will continue. So I'll answer it in two different parts. The daily routine that I have maintained since before the series, the iconography series, since before my Fabric of Time series, or my Fabric of Space and Time series, I have always had this habit or tradition or ritual of drawing at least one thing every day. It started out predominantly innocent, where I just so happened to draw every day. And then as I noticed a pattern of improvement or evolution, I realized in order to get to a place where I've really rose above this ritual and I found a purpose in this ritual, a direction to take this, was that if I kept going, I will ascend the staircase. Every drawing I did would allow me to keep stepping up above the thing I did yesterday, and then tomorrow I'll do another thing that will make today a previous step, and keep climbing. And then eventually got to a toxic level where I felt like if I wasn't climbing, I wasn't doing anything with my life. But over time, I found a nice balance of what is overdoing it, what is depleting your energy to such an extent that you might climb, but you'll be exhausted at the top. I found a pace of maintaining this practice of drawing every day. But in order to do this series, everything you've been watching, everything you've been listening to, I had to do, or I promised myself I didn't have to do anything. Although maybe people around me looked at me and saw that I was aggressively determined to do it every day. But that's practice. That's also passion. When you find that purpose, that practice becomes a passion. But in order to do this, I had to promise myself I would do a select amount of work every single day. And over time, after so many steps, after so many days, I will have a collective that displays my journey, that hike that I made. It's almost like a scrapbook of tradition, a scrapbook of ritual that I can look back on and think, wow, yeah, I went there, I did that, and I kept going. Not to say I did this all day, but this was a practice that I did at least 1 to 2 hours a day. I made sure that I did this, and it became my favorite thing. It was what I looked forward to. It was also a problem with my relationships. Like, I've had partners in my life that thought, why couldn't I do something like this with them every day? Why don't I look at them the same way that I look at this practice? And I really felt like I did, but you can feel a certain way, but it doesn't come across that way to others. Relationships can be difficult, but a relationship with yourself can be so much easier to recognize the functions and the cause and effect of your rituals and your daily practice. And over time, I'm learning through this daily practice of doing this every day what it means to do something every day with a purpose, and how that can be translated into a relationship. Even, let's say, a relationship with your family. If you stay in contact with them every day, that relationship can evolve to such an extent that we're seeing in the series. Like, as the images get more and more involved, deeper concepts, and we're extracting so much more, so much density, so much, for lack of a better word, love in this, and passion. That same thing can be translated to anything else you do every day, with your family, with your friends, with your partner, even something you do every day with your pet. It becomes a more and more meaningful tradition, something that you want to stick with, and it becomes your favorite thing. But I say this is my favorite daily practice because it's something I have maintained every day for years, and it's a practice that has helped me observe how this practice can be translated over to all different facets of my life if I do it as effectively as I've done with a pencil and paper. But one of the practices that I wish I did more, that when I do a month consecutively every day, I find myself not loving myself more, but feeling like myself can tell that I appreciate myself more, and that my body is happy with me, and if my body's happy with me, that my mind's happy with me, and everything else comes with more grace. But when I get into points in my life where I do a whole month without doing what I'm about to say, then I come across more impatient or annoyed, or like, like I don't have enough room for this kind of approach. And I think a lot of people have that problem because they don't incorporate a daily practice like doing breathing exercises every day. I learned about doing breathing exercises because of a car accident that I was in. It was stopping me from pursuing this other daily practice. So I had to find a practice that would balance out the trauma, so that I can even out pay my traumatic debt, physically speaking, so I can get back to doing this every day, because doing this every day is a micro trauma that you can recover from as long as you know how to recover from it. But if you go into debt, you just can't be spending this much every day. And I learned how to do breathing exercises, which helped me find a rhythm in my body's natural function. Like, you think, oh, I breathe every day, I breathe all day, I breathe all the time. Like, why would I focus on breathing? And it's like, you could say, oh yeah, I smack a hammer into a nail. Yeah, I could smack a hammer into a nail. But if you smack a hammer into a specific amount of nails, and those nails are in specific areas, and you have specific things that you're nailing things to, and then a specific blueprint that all of this nailing amounts to, which is a practice, you make a blueprint that plays out in a function that leads to a building that you hammered that nail into. Yes, you can hammer a nail. It's your body's function to be able to put two and two together. But when you build a practice of, in this case, breathing with rhythm, and breathing in a pattern, and breathing with depth in breath, and holding it, and getting to points where your body recognizes it doesn't need all this much all the time. It could take a short break, and then it can always breathe again. But to understand that there is a healthier pace of breathing, but also there's also a place for hyper breathing, for different purposes. But all of it helps you understand how to breathe more effectively, so that your body doesn't feel like it's going to erupt or collapse or drown in stress. And every time I'll do like a short thing, and I might not do it effectively because there is like anything, there should be a wean into, but and you'll hear the breath. There is a number that I count to, a number that I hold to, a number that I exhale and inhale to achieve a rhythm. And then in that rhythm, while I'm in the right posture, I find a place to really flow. My mind really flows. And in those places, I can really cultivate something or a purpose to take my other daily practices and more effectively and considerably like plan out how and why I'm going to do everything. But it goes like this, where you breathe in for 8 seconds. Oh no, you breathe in for 12 seconds, hold for 8, exhale for 12 seconds, hold for 8, and then you continue that until it's like you have a nice rhythm and you're not finding yourself holding your breath. You're just in that moment. So we'll go together. 1, 2, 3, breathe in. And repeat, rinse and repeat. That's a daily practice that I wish I did every single day. If I could do it morning and night, that would be amazing. But the body can be selfish, the mind can be the mind can be selfish and deprive the body of those practices in order to fill it with, whatever else you want to do every day. But yeah, give that a shot. It's called pranayama breathing. The intent of breathing in your stomach, into your diaphragm, into your chest, hold, out of your chest, out of your diaphragm, out of your stomach, hold, and rinse and repeat. That question kind of got out of hand. It's something I have passion with. It asks, what is my favorite daily routine? It's hard not to talk all day about that. But to break the ice, let's find a good pun. Why did Van Gogh become a painter? Because he didn't have an ear for music. That's kind of dark. That's dark. That's shit. Okay, back to this path, the iconography series. And at some point I should probably elaborate why I titled it iconography, but I think as more icons appear, it'll make more sense why I named it that. But yeah, I was in a place where I was dividing myself into halves and trying to see who I was in the yin and who I was in the yang, and what maybe sometimes what yang can be in the yin and what yin can be in the yang. But there wasn't a place where they were in harmony yet. They were just two segments of a whole that I was holding in either hand and observing one at a time in depth so that I can understand with focus what each one meant to me, so I knew what I could do to maybe instigate conversation that could lead to harmony. What you do to balance yourself is your own practice, but maybe some of the things that I discuss here could spark an idea that is more not familiar, but more compatible with how you live your life. Not everybody, draws to solve. Like I visualize to create solutions for what I do in my waking life. These are kind of like dreams that I have. And here I am interpreting them. That's what I'm doing. I'm interpreting these dreams to help me make sense of this dream that is forming in my mind before I put it on paper and bring that dream into reality. So it leads to this piece, the Wizard Peak. This is a piece that spoke to ritual, the routine. It's funny, these questions are starting to kind of sync up. These randomly generated, who knows what random means. But yeah, this piece was about finding a ritual that can lead to a daily effort to understand myself and what was constructive and what was deconstructive, what destroyed me, and how I could destroy with intent to slash and burn certain things and allow things to grow from, and what I needed to focus on building so that I had a solid structure to live my life. There's a ecosystem to, your attributes and your traits. And we all have a different ecosystem, just like the nature has a different ecosystem with swamps and deserts and rainforests and mountainous forests and the ocean and all of that. There are certain things that we're bred into or breed ourselves to function. And if you are an invasive species, or if there's an invasive species in your ecosystem, in this case, the invasive species would be metaphorically a poor decision that repeats and becomes a living entity that is disrupting the peace and the harmony in your ecosystem. And it becomes a personality trait, but it doesn't have to. That personality trait is rooted in a specific introduction of this animal, this decision that you make one day, and it becomes a decision that you almost forget you have a choice to make, and then that becomes destructive. So in order to represent that that pattern or that routine, that ritual, I kind of wanted to, like I mentioned, every day climbs to that next step, and then as you get higher and higher, I mentioned before in other episodes, you get better and better views of where it is you are hiking, what is below you, and what builds the foundation of where you stand now. And that's why this kind of rises to this point, and you would metaphorically climb this contour, or some people would rock climb it. It doesn't have to be necessarily as structured as stairs. It can be organic, where you might barely be able to hold yourself up with this little pinch. But if you have the capabilities, this might be the most efficient way to get up higher. Life can be structured and life can be organic. How you arrive to that is up to you. Some people will go through the metaphorical effort of etching into a boulder in order to create steps. So that not only do they have the steps to climb, but they have the ease to climb back down, up and down, like it's your temple. But some people can climb walls like it's steps. Some people, that's how they live. That is their routine. But I use this. I use the motif of Nug and the culture and rituals that envelop your practice of ingesting the psychoactive compounds, THC, CBD, combination of CBNs, whatever it has to be, whatever your strains specify, or the collective, in order to get that essence, that substance into your life. And that substance, that outcome is the metaphor for reaching a point of understanding in my life. Like, to achieve this high is the same to me as achieving a high of self-understanding, a self-awareness. So as the structures that I reference arrange this metaphorical world of aiming to understand itself through visual landscapes and iconography and just those themes, I aim to understand myself in hopes that I reach this point of looking down on myself and understanding who I am, and looking up and understanding what I can do now with that understanding, that self-awareness. So in order to translate that connection, I used the item, the functional item in this cultural motif that allows me to roll up and wrap up these concepts, these nuggets, and put them in a bring them to a means of consumption. So like that means, like, to me it means I take these ideas and I grind them up so that they can be fused together in a way. And then as I take all those ideas and fuse them together, they become this curriculum of a hoping to understand. And then with the means of rolling paper, I can give it a classroom. I might air quote a lot to reference metaphorical speech, but because a piece of paper isn't necessarily a classroom, but what really is a classroom? It doesn't have to be four walls surrounding you with a teacher, exactly. But this piece of paper is the means of rolling up those ideas into into this function where I can take gradual sips, and with every sip I take in substance. I get closer to that self-awareness, to that high of understanding myself. And the practice of doing that every time you roll up is something that helps me understand what it takes to understand yourself. You have to build a practice where you consciously break down things to understand it deeper and put it back together to apply it all, and then digest what it is you learned to achieve that high of being above your corporeal self and understanding like who you are on multiple facets from many different views. So I used a raw representation of that paper here at the bottom, and it's all crumpled up. It's I used jobs at the time. Yes, they're bleached, but I was ignorant. I just had an idea, and there was a function. Maybe that's representative of how I was approaching it initially. Like, yes, maybe my classrooms were bleached and they weren't raw, but I used what I had with the knowledge that I had, and I was just trying to walk forward. We all make mistakes, but I was using a bleached paper. They go by Jobs. You might know them. They're a French brand, and you might recognize the striations in some of the textures that we're looking at now. But I started with a ambiguous representation of these papers to discuss how we look at them this way, and it's not obvious to us that there are these means of assembling a curriculum of aiming to understand ourselves. Like these means are all around us. Like there are places that sell this, that promote this, and it's up to you to recognize that you can take that little paper, iron it back out so it's useful, and then look, do 2 plus 2 and be like, okay, 2 plus 2 equals, put the thing in the thing and roll it up. Like it's like life feels to me, or at the time it felt just as ambiguous to make this choice to build this ritual, because I looked around me and the world looked like just as confusing as this structure. I'm just like, what do I look at? What do I focus on? Like, it all looks like everything all at once. What can I get out of this? But that everything is your opportunity to cut out a slip and, make it more approachable and less intimidating and less confusing. And as it rises, the paper starts to find this form, this these framing devices, where it's still crumpled. It's still the fabric of space and time. It could still be observed in these abstract ways, but there's this contour that segments them into windows to understand that and kind of ignore what's around and just look through that window and explain to yourself what it is you see, describe what you see to yourself. And with every window, you understand more about the outside world. So these joints, these doobies, are representative and they're metaphorical for honing in on a construct that can assemble this chaos. Like, it was the most harmonious effort to arrange chaos, and in that, I was able to ignite one tip, one purpose, one aim, to then go down the line and finish an interpretation of life, an interpretation of where I stood, an interpretation of who I am. Am I more masculine? Am I more feminine? Am I more, like the obvious answer now, a mixture of both? And hopefully a perfect harmony of both. So I'm not one or the other. I am this marriage, for lack of a better word, of two sides that were never two, but they were always one. And they were warped based on the chaos around you that confused you. So as I'm climbing up this wizard peak, and I call it wizard peak because in order to get to that peak, you almost feel like the world's magic, or you're doing magic, unraveling yourself, and like you're pulling rabbits out of a hat that you can't believe they fit in that hat, and you're like, geez, who am I? What is this? Like, what is the hat? Like, who's watching? Like, who built the stage? And you're just like, dude, like, this is magic. But you can ignore that magic in moments to realize, like, you need to take physical steps, real physical steps, in order to achieve this peak of understanding. And like any mountain range, there's more than one peak. Or like the earth itself, there's more than one peak. To achieve one peak doesn't mean you have accomplished that. It just means you've reached a pinnacle of understanding one part of yourself. But understanding one part of yourself is a means of seeing the bigger picture, the larger landscape around you, and that's where you can spot the opportunity of understanding another facet of yourself when you see another mountain range with various peaks and whole like spines of peak that lead down this path. And I just kept getting to this point where I was like, wow. I think I can manage this. And I keep climbing, and the chaos around me becomes a whole other framing device. Like there's this contour, just like there's a contour around this, twisted end. It's like this whole practice of building a practice is like me taking this larger frame and twisting its end and just like deciding, okay, I'm ready to ignite. Like I am twisting the end of this composition, and as it twists, the intent to ignite and to apply these lessons that I've learned becomes more apparent. And that's why you see these lit joints where you see the ash that's piling up. And I remember at the time I was taking pictures of all these. I rolled these myself. Everything here I drew from life, except for the little tiny people that roam this place. I drew like real doobies that I rolled, some for myself, some for friends, and some for groups. They all had different intentions, but I would try to balance the ash and sip on it and balance the ash so that it got taller and taller, and then I could see what was left, like the chaos that was within this beautiful frame, this device of understanding, and it would help me recognize that the chaos will always be there, but that I managed to digest it, and also not only digest it but balance it. Even though the wind might be blowing, a few feet away, I found a place where it could survive, and I can enjoy it and interpret it and reapply it. So it got to a point where that became the purpose of this. I don't know if I have the words for that yet, but I knew that there was a more fine-tuned purpose to creating this ritual, and that was to reapply it to something else. Like the ritual was to build a ritual is to build a staircase, but to build a staircase is to suggest there's a place to go, and to suggest there's a place to go is to suggest that there is something to see, and to suggest there's something to see means that there's something you want to bring back to share with the world, and that evidence of these beautiful framing devices returning back to chaos, being this ash, and then eventually dissolving and falling into a pit of ash. It just suggests like so much more than just the intent of building ritual. Like what does it all amount to? And also the ephemeral nature of all of this. Like you could do all of this, but it reaches a point where it needs to dissolve and blow in the wind, and you start over. You reach a new peak, a new peak, maybe a new peach. But you look for a new peak to climb because you have finished this intent. And it's funny, all that chaos, that ash that was originally the nugget that was ground up. Finally, it starts looking in this style like the original nug. Like it's making this full circle effect where the intent to build a ritual and running through its course reaches its raw state, like a new raw state. Like this is where it started. That nug was the reason I wrote that purpose, that trophy of self-awareness is represented as this nug, and this ritual to climb to that point. Even though it's burning in the process and dissolving, it reaches this corporeal form of concept that is the nug, that is self-awareness. And it seems almost backwards to me to take that original concept that's at the very tip of this, grind it up, find the things around me that can encase it, then light it, burn it, observe the eradication of that concept, and in that eradication and that awareness and that protection and that balance of that eradication and trying to understand it on a deeper level leads to the source that started it all. Like you just go in this full circle, and I put this rim of smoke around it because as you're climbing, you can't see the point, you can't see the tip of this peak. You just know that you trust your process, that this is working for you, and that when you get past that veil, you'll be able to see the purpose, and that purpose was like what was within this practice, and the practice almost becomes the purpose, and the nugget will always be there, but what you do with that nugget and how you digest it is more that nugget than the nugget itself. Like, and remember, the nugget is a metaphor for for self-awareness and appreciation for your surroundings, and a place of being grateful. And sometimes you get lost in the ash, and you are the ash, and you get stuck at that point, and you don't want to climb any higher. You don't believe there's anything any higher, and you stay in this world of chaos as a result of your rituals. But if you just keep climbing and keep questioning, and as you question, or subconsciously or unconsciously keep climbing in that effort, you'll reach this point where you almost reach a fog of like, I don't really know what I'm doing anymore. How far can I really take this? And then right past that fog, you see that you've been doing it this whole time. And even your questioning state, or your self-deprecating, or your habits of destroying yourself, but being aware of that destruction and the outcome was the whole purpose. Like, as long as you are aware of everything you're doing, you are getting what you need out of this life, out of this practice. But it takes an effort to find a place where you can assemble it all in order to run through its course to eventually get to this place. Otherwise, you are always in this void that surrounds your intent. You're going to be always in this potential energy space, this infinite space, where like you're in the space where this idea penetrated through. It almost makes me think about how, like, there's death, where you have life, or you come from the place that you wound up leaving and heading towards. We come from this void, and then we go back into the void at the end of our life, and we come from this void to live a purpose, to see ourselves, to be aware, to penetrate through this veil of the void. We live it out through the chaos. We find a purpose. We find this pattern, and we constantly question it, and we keep having new lessons to learn from, and we reapply, and then we reach this point where we break through a veil within the veil, and you understand your purpose. But then, after you understand your purpose, like, you are this ephemeral peak. Like, you've reached your point, and you can either, like, literally die at this larger peak of life and go back into the void of like the sea level of existence, and then, if you, whatever you believe, you can re-erect through it, and like, life needs you for something else, and then you emerge with this new idea, this new pattern, and this new ritual, and then it's almost like peaks in, like, sound. Like, you make this sound, and you go back down into this, like, this line of non-audible sound. The intention might always be there, but it hasn't erupted into a purpose to hear and to experience. But you keep experiencing, like, that, like a song is many different peaks, and that song is like your life that you're living. And you reach this peak, but you have this intent to create a melody with your life. So you go back down, you arrive to a new peak, but it might not have to be as tall as the peak before, because you don't need to see all that much. You understand it, and then it builds this variety that is your life. But then that is, I think, the universe is living with the same purpose, and its intent is to build this melody, this frequency of awareness. And me just hoping to understand that through ritual has gotten me to this point of understanding that for myself, so that I have more peace with the world, more peace with my purpose in the world, and more faith in the process of existence and life and death, because ritual is about rising and falling and rising and falling. But in the effort of the emergence and the destruction and the awareness of all of it, the yin and the yang, you reach this point of self-awareness that is honed and harmonized, and on that awareness you can rest and hang out with yourself. Like you appreciate yourself enough to like not need to climb all the time, like to enjoy the view. And it might be hard to tell here, but there's a group of people like around a fireplace, and these are all like different facets of yourself. It could be your group of friends, and everyone has their part to play in the crew, but that crew is equivalent to all the different people in your mind, the different perspectives that you have that have a relationship with each other in your mind. Each person is a belief that you have that interacts with another belief in your life, and you have a whole crowd in your mind usually. And many times the people you hang out with can embody different parts of yourself, and vice versa. So I built this like group of people that are all hanging out. One's on the hammock underneath the tree, like one's hanging out at the edge of this cliff of self-awareness with another person, and they're passing a pipe or passing a joint along. Like there's this ritual that leads to a ritual of passing the knowledge on to another. Like, hey, I rolled up this thought, this realization, and I've been smoking this all day. Like, do you want a sip of this realization? Maybe it can vibe with you, and it doesn't always vibe. Some people can have a bad trip and like be anxious knowing that about themselves, or about how another person thinks about themselves. This whole conversation might be doing that to you, or it might be exactly what you need to sip on right now. But this is me passing it on to another person to think, to see what they think about a ritual I have done in order to learn this about my view on life. And that's the beauty of sessions. It's kind of where this whole series started, where it was the pass, like they were passing a roach. The several parts of themselves from either end reached the point where they achieved the pass, and that's the most important thing. It might seem like the most insignificant pass, but it's that pass that shares this self-awareness, so that we can all be in a communal self-awareness to help each other out and be there for each other, whether it's conceptually based or more literal, like, hey, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Like, do you need a blanket? Like, or in a more conceptual way, like what do you understand about society? Like, how do they really feel? Like, what's going on behind your viewpoint that you should understand in order to be more empathetic? And you're passing that idea along, and you're getting each other high, for lack of a better word, or it's within this motif of the nug, you're getting them high on this other supply that helps them see themselves in that chemistry differently, and they might live on as a different person, knowing that can be a thing to experience. But also, even beyond that, you can live in that, you can be in that, you can get settled. This is like a little settlement at the top of this peak. You can get settled in that, but then above all of that is an awareness of that settlement. And it's this little bird. Like, there's two birds that are discussing the settlement, but then there's a bird that's above it all, the very tip. It's like two lines that build all of this structure. Like, this structure below is constructed out of very similar lines that build this M bird, the classic bird you draw when you're like 3 or 4, to describe something flying in the air. And that M bird is at the very tip of this purpose. You run through this hike, you ascend all these steps, you experience all of this, and you learn so much from what you're doing in life and how you cope with life. And even if you could climb this whole thing and not build a single vessel to understand it, it could all just be chaos that reaches that point. But you get to a point where hopefully you're above it all, you're disconnected, disassociated, and disassociated in a way not like you lack an association with it, but you can separate yourself from that experience and understand it more objectively, um, so that you can carry the weight and pass it along to another person so that they can understand it on a more objective level, and then what they understand can become subjective to their own hike, their own experience, their own interpretation of their life and the lives around them. This whole thing is important, but this bird's eye view is the most important part to me. If you don't achieve that bird's eye view of this intent, this ritual, the peak of the wizard ascent, you will only settle at the very top, and you may never see another peak around you. But this bird, this self-awareness can fly through like consciousness, and you can, with that higher view, you can see, oh wow, there's so much more to explore. This is only one peak. You can't understand the whole your whole world. This can be taken literally too, but you can't understand your whole world just by reaching one peak. But reaching one peak of self-awareness can help you understand that there's so much more to understand, and you get back, you settle back. That bird, touches the tree, as these two birds are, and then you settle back down. You reach this point where you enter the void again. You are settled at sea level, and then you explore the rest of your landscape. And if that landscape means climbing again, you climb again. But once you reach one peak where you are aware of such an altitude of yourself, that altitude allows you to see so many other different ecosystems that can be explored. It doesn't always have to be an ascent. It can be just like music. It doesn't always go above the line, it goes below. And that descent into the ocean can or even as shallow as the swamps, can expose a whole different natural phenomenon of awareness. So this piece, I've never actually done this before, but it doesn't have to be pointing up. It could be like a stalactite of self-awareness, and you're still moving forward in one direction to understand the point of that momentum, and then like life and death, you descend back. Whatever your rate of ascent and descent is, you reach that middle ground again, that control of self-awareness to decide whether you want to go back up or down, or stay in the middle, or fluctuate somewhere in the middle of either. Depends on what the melody is that you want your life to be. And the more you practice, the more you build this ritual, the more you know what notes to play, what things to maintain. And as you play your first song, you're like, wow, I love the life I lived in order to achieve that melody, but I kind of, based on what I understood about living that melody, I want to live this way now. I want to play this tone of song. I want to have this mood. And it's all just an intent to understand where you're coming from and where you want to go, and what where you belong in your surroundings, and what your surroundings mean to you, and vice versa, like that connection between all of it. But again, this whole thing for me was trying to understand which side I leaned on, this more masculine mentality of control, or this more feminine mentality of acceptance. and trying to see if I'm this or that, or if I'm more this or more that, or if I should just be a harmony. I needed to go on this path. And as I produced this and I was doing this every day and working on some piece every day, every time I would draw, whether I wasn't writing, but I was thinking at the time about what I was living through, the new people I was meeting, what they were saying, what I was doing in school, how I was speaking to my parents, my relationship with my brother. And this ascent was my first real attempt to understand why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, where am I headed, what is the pinnacle of all of this, and what can I understand about myself at the very top. And I did not get an answer about which one I was, but I saw the extent of my surroundings, how much more there was to see about yourself and about others in this communal space of awareness, whether self or communal awareness. And I had to find a way to reach those other peaks and explore the rest. And all the pieces that will come here on out are these various peaks or planes, or just realms of trying to understand where I'm coming from. And I almost forget the purpose in the middle of like my initial question. And like I said before, you can reach this point where you're in the fog and you can't really see where you came from and you can't see where you're going, but you still understand that that is part of your trek. You reach these points where you reach a certain altitude where it's cloudy, you're in a different atmosphere and it's foreign, but you still keep moving with your intent to ascend or descend, and you'll reach a new level of that awareness. And with that, you carry that on to the rest of your journey. But yeah, that's what the Wizard Peak was about for me. But again, I'll say it again and again, however many times I have to. That's the reason I did this, but the outcome is something entirely. It can be something entirely different. There's so much more to still be seen in this that I have to look back at it, and I rarely do this, but even I see so much more than what I saw at the time, because I rarely look back at my work, my older work, and with what I know now, I'm seeing so much more, because I know what surrounds this piece. And I kind of just want to do a little exploration. Maybe anyone watching will see imagery, or like I see like this guy right here by the left ear of this figure that's kind of looking to the right, and they're on their knees with their hands behind their back, and they're observing maybe like their own shadow up against the wall. Like just random things like that. Like you see so much. But that's, keep in mind, as I'm thinking these things and I'm observing life and I'm translating it on paper, I'm seeing, and I don't remember all of it, but at the time I would see these visions on the paper after drawing these crumpled papers where I could see a memory. And that could be Rorschach type mentality where you have this random stain and it becomes what you feel. But I saw so many different scenes in this effort, and it was like how I was scrapbooking these ambiguous, merging life experiences into one entity, one purpose. But that aside, like to me it's just a surreal landscape to observe and to break apart. And I'll also recognize that this is all something that came from the most mundane thing. It's just this crumpled piece of thin rice paper that's bleached, and it can become your whole life depending on how you look at it. Perspective is so important to perception. Like that seems obvious, but Sometimes it takes something as weird as this to make you understand the magic of it all. And I saw, as I was thinking about the Wizard Peak, I saw these, they look like wizards, like they look like mentors, like they're wearing these robes and they're all hanging out as like a collective. Each doobie is hanging out with their little wizard caps, and they're all like discussing magic with each other about life and philosophies. They're all facing different directions, and then they transform through process, and they become, through magic and self-awareness, they become the chaos itself, or they understand that the chaos was within them, and it takes igniting their deeper desires, their deeper awarenesses, their deeper intent in order to expand. And it almost feels like you're destroying yourself in the process, but you are, through destruction, you can understand what it takes to build yourself up. And this isn't the best picture, but you could still get a good or a general idea of the structure. But all right, I hope I didn't talk your ears off too much. I hope something was resonant, that you saw something in this that maybe I didn't discuss, or maybe something I said really touched you in a meaningful, relevant way. I'm gonna, at some point this week, go back and listen to whatever just regurgitated from this mouth, to maybe see or hear something that I never recognize as I'm talking or as I'm thinking. Like, thoughts in your mind are so ephemeral. They become so prominent, and then as other thoughts splash in the realm of reflection, self-reflection, it disappears or dissipates, but it's all there. It's always there. So I'm going to listen back to this, and hopefully I get something out of it too. More than what I already understood about this piece. But all right, that is Wizard Peak. What comes next is kind of wild. There's more intent to applying this and these lessons, and I try my best to merge my dualities, and the life I live kind of suggests that emergence and experimentation, and whether it was good or bad for me, that's a whole nother story, but I will get there when I get there. But for the meantime, I have another Peibi Playhouse episode. A lot of the episodes right now are prerequisite deities that led up to the main characters of the Peibi Playhouse, and also the construction of different stage sets, and it's all part of building the world that I am currently residing in as a Peibi. And as they come out, you'll understand more about what a Peibi means. Because everything I'm discussing here is infused into my intent in creating them. They're not as innocent as they may come across. They have a lot of weight to them. But yeah, here's my next Peibi Playhouse episode. And until we meet again for episode 8, I hope you have a good day, a good night, and a good time in general. Peace.